Aloha. You're watching Cradlepoint's quarterly threat intelligence report video. I'm Peter Silva. Now, each quarter, the Cradlepoint Threat Intelligence and Analysis team researches and informs you, our customers, about the threat landscape and provides threat intelligence that also informs our Cradlepoint product design and ability to respond to active threats. Now, this current report covers events from October through December. And just to give you a quick look at it, we'll put the URL in the description for you. And I am thrilled to have Alex Ryan, who's a senior intelligence analyst with us. And you actually do the reports, don't you, Alex?
Yes, that's right. The team and I that I'm on, we write those reports. So, yes.
Cool. So can you tell our audience briefly just a little bit about the threat intelligence and research team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a senior intelligence analyst, and Cradlepoint has a threat research and analysis team. And our team monitors the threat landscape for developing threats to our customers. Based on our research, we curate the detection logic for intrusion prevention in Cradlepoint's Net Cloud Exchange SASE solution. And so for the reports that we publish our findings in our quarterly threat intelligence report, which we're talking about today.
Right on. So what were some of the highlights? So let's first off, again, we'll show the URL, we'll put it in the description, but what are some of the interesting things you found in Q4 of 2023?
You bet. So, of course, there was a lot going on, but we like to really focus our reports on specific aspects. Since the scope is huge, we want to really bring it down and focus on something that's useful for our customers. So in this quarter, we focused on initial access techniques from some high impact incidents from Q4. In the introduction of our report, we look at some of the metrics which show how patching should not be considered a first line of defense any longer. The increased pressure on IT organizations is from a combination of increased critical patches that are being released and the speed of exploits developed after a patch is published. Right. So there was a 33% increase in exploited vulnerabilities listed in CISA's KEV, which is the known exploited vulnerabilities list, compared to Q4 of 2022. So a big uptick in the number of critical vulnerabilities coming out, right? So that's part of the squish. And then the second part is that Qualys reported that 25% of high-risk CVEs have exploits published using those vulnerabilities within 24 hours of those vulnerabilities being published. And we have 0 day, right? So we've got like these really compounding developments that are making patching almost an impossible task for our defenders.
It is pretty crazy, right? That because like we talked about before, how a patch. So there's whether it's a 0 day or even just a public announcement of a CVE, and that very same day the vendor issues a patch. So it's a 0 day and a patch is available, but obviously IT departments can't just shut down systems, patch across the board. So that's kind of the delay you're talking about, their ability to jump on it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Operations is king, right? The systems have to work, otherwise they're not of value to the business. So, oftentimes patchers, defenders have to go through a change control board, something like that delays the implementation of a patch. Some real world business processes that really make it almost impossible to meet these patching deadlines.
Yeah, wow. Pretty interesting stuff. So obviously the takeaway, the lessons learned from that is, you certainly have those change management, times or maintenance windows, but you really got to be on top of it as new 0 days come out almost like on a daily basis, it seems.
And that trend will continue in 2024. Absolutely. To me, and what we are talking about here at Cradlepoint is putting in place SASE solutions to limit the number of people that can access the application, and then also limit what in the application and what data can be accessed by a user. So we need to get more preventative about people having access to applications.
Yeah, exactly. So I also know in the report you had some kind of eye-opening statistics of records lost. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So sort of following on, this is where we really focus on the initial access techniques, right? So we had a couple of techniques that were happening for our 3 top data breaches in Q4. So the first one I want to talk about is AlphaV ransomware. So using the attack framework, ransomware infection is actually the 4th stage in an attack lifecycle. Before ransomware execution are reconnaissance, resource development, and then initial access. And remember that AlphaV is a ransomware as a service group, and affiliates, which is other hackers, need to first compromise an environment before they can launch the ransomware. So AlphaV affiliates are known for using valid credentials. So how did they even get those credentials? And phishing, of course, will always take the top spot in credential theft, but we're also seeing info stealer malware trending up as well. So in last quarter's report, we talked about the one-click browser compromise using the libwebp vulnerability. The user only had to click on an image to download malware, like an info stealer. So what do info stealers do? They collect and exfiltrate session tokens, credentials, and other information from the browser, which they can then use to hijack sessions or use credentials for initial access in these attacks.
Wow. And I read recently that stolen credentials are the most common form of data breach. Like we've been talking about this before. The phishing emails, and there's, what is it, like, I don't know, 50% of all emails these days are spam, and phishing's the most common cybercrime out there. But right, phishing is just that delivery mechanism of some sort of payload if they actually click on that phishing link.
Yeah, absolutely. So both protecting the browser, isolating the browser, but then also doing content inspection. So if a user is entering their credentials onto, a public website or a website that has a poor reputation, being able to block that is really key.
So which of these so I see it right here, the stolen valid credentials, AKA the credential stuffing. Now, the thing about credential stuffing, because they're doing millions of them all at once on various sites out there, something like even if they have like a 0.02% success rate, that could still mean like 100,000, 200,000 valid credentials that they grabbed. Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers aren't in our favor. That's for sure, right? They only have to be right once. We have to be right all the time. So yeah, definitely it's difficult. And with credential stuffing, that's a little different than stolen valid credentials. Credential stuffing is, say there's a compromise of accounts somewhere else, and so attackers assume that folks are going to reuse their passwords, and so they try and use those same credentials in other applications as well, and are very successful.
Yeah, and that's a good clarification. I think the way I presented it, I was more talking about the huge number of potential credentials that they have, and having the success rate of. I also am pretty sure BlackCat. So here's a little tip for organizations. BlackCat's the one who reported one of their victims to the SEC because the victim didn't properly, at least in their viewpoint, report the breach. So I guess lesson learned, make sure you're, reporting it rather accurately and quickly. So what's this next one, the Cl0p one?
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to Cl0p, what we find is that beginning in May, Cl0p launched a very successful campaign against the MOVEit application, which is a file transfer and sharing application. The breaches that were reported in Q4 are a continuing result of organizations still learning how much data was exfiltrated during those compromises. The initial access technique for this campaign was a 0-day SQL injection technique. So in the attack lifecycle, this is a resource development stage by the threat actor, which we really can't control. What we can control is red teaming an application for vulnerabilities, not just scanning it with a scanner, but actually doing live person creative types of application testing, obviously field input validation, and then using SASE solutions for, as we mentioned before, authentication and limited access to application functions.
Yeah, you know, the only thing I want to add to that, so that Cl0p one was a managed service provider, if I remember correctly. Is that right? And they had the systems that were then servicing the credit agencies. Do I remember that right?
So yes, there were third parties breached, but there were also, sort of organization that were hosting their own. So many people were compromised by this, all sorts of service profiles, from organizations to third parties to vendors all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. The only thing I wanted to bring this up is kind of a stat that I came across recently from Scientia Institute. 98% of organizations have a relationship with at least one third party that has experienced a breach in the last 2 years. So they're your, how do we say it nicely? They're your business partners that need, it's true access, validated access to potentially sensitive corporate information, but that's, part of their job working with the organization, but that can certainly be a big old hole in the, in your sort of, what do they call that? Threat landscape. There we go. That's the word.
Right. That's right. We also see valid credentials being used in VPN attacks. So if you have a third party that's coming in through a VPN, even though they're coming from a third party, absolutely restrict their access. Don't give them network level access, only application access, and then limit, what kind of access you give them to limit your risk.
Right. And then I see a 1.5 billion records. That seems like a lot.
It is the largest single data breach in ever.
Wow.
Yes, that is on record, that has been reported. So what happened here is that for the real estate wealth networks, it was a misconfigured database that was internet facing, and I really feel for the administrator that this happened with. Absolutely, this was not meant to be. It was a mistake. They did not intend this. However, it does bring me back to the message of these things can't be on the internet anymore, right? Yeah. Firewalls aren't working. VPN concentrators, routers, all of those are being attacked with such a high level of frequency. And then on top of that, right, we have these misconfigurations, and it's just, we need to change our defenses.
It's pretty amazing, especially that SQL injection one that's been on the OWASP top 10 for close to 25 years. And somehow we still haven't figured out how to protect against it. Now, I also know you have some MITRE. I was going to ask you, so what in your what in the fourth quarter kind of was prophesized in the third quarter? And then, of course, I'm going to ask you, what this report might tell us about quarter one. But I also know you have some interesting stuff about these, the MITRE attack framework stuff.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show that with these different techniques, sometimes when there's a bunch of words when everybody's talking about it, and I love to have pictures. So for the BlackCat, you can see that the actual exploitation, the execution of the malware is, 4 columns down, which means that you have 3 columns of opportunity to stop this attack. So that's really the point with this graphic. If you want to go to the next one.
Sure.
So this is Cl0p and their MOVEit, right? So we see that gathering victim host information, what kind of application they're hosting, those kinds of things, that is typically from scanning, or if they're targeting a specific company or organization, depending on their motivation, right? So we need to limit who can conduct reconnaissance against our hosts that are internet facing, and sometimes even internal, right? If they come in through the VPN and they've got valid credentials, right? These are still valid ways of defending ourselves, not giving network level access, only application level access, etc. And then developing capabilities, we can't do anything about that, but we can definitely make sure that our applications are not available on the internet, that we have done our own vulnerability type of testing on that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's I get it, right? Unplugging a server so that it's not reachable on the internet, certainly like 100% secure, right? But organizations often need to have, some entities. So would it be maybe more, down to that interface? Maybe that interface itself shouldn't be necessarily internet exposed, but still needs to be found if it needs to pass traffic for whatever the back-end systems are.
Yeah, but use a SASE type of defense, right?
There you
So
go.
absolutely, it's internet accessible, sure, but you have to authenticate, and you have to be from the right geo, the right time frame. There's many layers of security that can happen on an internet-facing application before you actually get to the point where you can do, a content injection attack. Like I said, there's 4 columns of opportunity that we have, right, to put defenses.
You picked up on my little lead there. I love how you kind of got the 0 days requires zero trust as it pertains to
well done.
gaining access to information. Nice pickup on there, Alex. So that question I kind of posed a moment ago. So now that you have the fourth quarter results, was there, now that you have the results, anything that was hinting toward these results from the third quarter report?
Yeah, sort of I mentioned before, the libwebp, right? Being able to do a one-click download of malware, info stealers ticking up. We'll see more attacks using valid credentials, and then 0 days, right? Because Cl0p has been so successful, right? It's in any business. Somebody sees something being successful, doing a particular play, people are going to follow and say, yes, let me do that too.
Yeah, and somewhat the same with 0 day vulnerabilities is once that 0 day is announced and they know that area code where it came from, there then becomes a lot of attention both before, during, and after that code to find more vulnerable. I mean, if there's one there, hey, more than likely there's a couple others. And I've seen a statistic where just a couple of years ago, new 0 days were only like 21% of new 0 days were kind of an offshoot of an original 0 day. So not, kind of nearby and not necessarily attributed to, but kind of somewhere similar in the mechanisms. And now that's like up to 41% because now everybody's in that little spot, scouring. Okay, if there was a mistake there's potentially another mistake right here, and boom, we got a new 0 day in that.
Yeah, absolutely. With dependencies in code, with the way developers have their own style of coding, right? It's very often that you'll be able to use the same techniques because you have the same developer, or development team.
So if you're looking in your crystal ball and it has Q4 2023 threat intelligence now as part of its language model, you like how I'm working all that stuff in?
I love it.
So what do you see how Q1 of 24 is going to play out?
So I think that, this conversation has been developing over Q4, a little bit in Q3 about the data leakage through AI, right? We're using AI more and more and leaking or losing information. And again, this is sort of like in the misconfiguration category, right? People are not doing this maliciously. They just have a problem to solve. They just plop their code in, or whatever their code has, session tokens or credentials or whatever that might be in the code. and then that's, able to be exfiltrated out by folks who are savvy about how to use AI machines to find out what they've learned, right? So I would say that organizations will continue to focus more and more on how to not lose data through their employees using generative AI.
Yep. And incidentally, we at Cradlepoint have a solution to help protect against data leakage with Gen AI, and actually in some ways protect against a lot of this malware with just isolation. And I come from the application services and security world, and I'm convinced like isolation really is that true zero trust, an isolated container away from everything. All the active content detonates, if you will, far away from, machines like mine that, can be infected and then subsequently impact the entire organization. We don't want that.
No, don't want that. I agree. Isolation is number one. I've been using it since 2017, and the ease of implementation for that technology is immensely better than it was back then. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of that also.
Nice. All right. So there you have it, a little bit about our Q4 Threat Intelligence Report. Actually, it's officially, what is it officially called?
So internally, it's the Q1. It is retrospective for the previous quarter, but we just call it the Threat Intelligence Report on the website.
And we do it every quarter. You'll be back next quarter.
Every quarter.
Again in a couple of months. This is pretty fun. I hope you guys, our audience, enjoyed this. Check out Alex's article, the Threat Intelligence Report, to get even more information about the many topics we talked today. Really interesting. Fun having you on here, Alex. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, super awesome. Thank you, Peter.
Cool. Check it out online. If you like this kind of content, please hit that like, that sub, and the ding dong bell to get notified when next quarter's Threat Intelligence Report comes out. Appreciate all of you. For Alex, I'm Peter, and we're with Cradlepoint. Thanks for watching.